I wouldn't say that I'm afraid of the dark, but after a long backpacking trip in Central America, I have a more intimate understanding of what the darkness is like. I didn't expect to spend 4 months in the town of San Marcos, Guatemala, but then again, I guess no one expected the first wave of COVID. I remember watching a YouTube video of our Prime Minister urging any and all Canadians abroad to come home. I remember my heart leap into my throat with panic. No one even knew what this virus was. Were we gonna be okay? Would there be enough food? I was able to calm down pretty quick. I reasoned that San Marcos, a relaxed and remote jungle town, would be an ideal place to wait out whatever this was. So movement in and out of the town was restricted, and we adapted as best we could. Women made masks out of traditional Mayan fabric. Certain people stockpiled jars of tahini, and we made a practice of sanitizing our hands. I once offered hand sanitizer to an old Guatemalan gentleman who, when he was almost out of eyesight, promptly licked his palm in order to consume the maybe alcoholic gel. Some of us were taking it more seriously than others. I went to register with the federal government's list of Canadians abroad. I'm not sure why I did this. I guess I felt the need to be at least somewhat responsible. I needed my passport number to register. I went to get my passport. And in my little pyramid-shaped hut, I found that when there are rainstorms, there's one spot in the hut where the water pools, and that was the one spot where I had stored my passport. My heart sank as I opened the soggy document to realize that the photo from it had completely faded. There was no way to tell whose passport this belonged to. To make matters weirder, this was literally the only item that got wet. To make matters even weirder, this was on April 1st, and I remember looking up at the ceiling and thinking, who did this? Like this was some type of odd cosmic practical joke. If I wasn't stuck in San Marcos before, I certainly was now. A month or so later, I transitioned into working as a permaculture design apprentice at a yoga retreat center called the Yoga Forest. It was usually very busy, but because of the circumstances, it was pretty empty. It was here I learned about stomach parasites, or as the locals call it, mal de mayo. Apparently, it's a fairly common occurrence that when the rainy season begins in May, people get stomach parasites, and there's not a lot you can do about it except be very careful that you never ingest even a single drop of untreated water, which is way harder to do than it sounds, especially if you're living in an off-grid community. The yoga forest was beautiful, truly. It was perched on a hill overlooking San Marcos, the lake, and the surrounding mountain ranges. We each got our own cabana, and we had unlimited access to the yoga halls and Temazcal sauna. On the other side of the coin, we had no electricity, refrigeration, or running water. We filtered all of our water through our one precious water filter into a jug for drinking. Hot water wasn't a thing unless we boiled it on our one gas burner. We did all of our laundry and washing by hand. It was hard work, and it became harder one day when I realized that my snot was bright orange. I never learned what the name of the stomach parasite was, but I remember going to the town doctor and in my poor Spanish asking, "Parasito?" and him saying, "Sí, parasito." He wrote down the antibiotics I needed, and that was the entire conversation. I remember eating only pumpkin seeds and drinking apple cider vinegar straight from the bottle. I learned that you can more or less keep stomach parasites at bay as long as you don't eat sugar, which is naturally occurring in almost everything. Sometimes I felt so hungry, so weak, and so sick that I would eat an entire loaf of bread in a trance of hunger. There were aliens inside of my body making me crave sugar, and it was all I could think about. I talked about it so much that all of my targeted Instagram ads became for bakeries in El Salvador and Guatemala City. My feed was filled with cupcakes. Eventually, I took the antibiotics that had been prescribed. I had been hesitant before because everyone told me that they would wipe out my healthy gut flora, but my resolve was gone. I needed to listen to the parasites, or I needed to listen to my body, and I needed the parasites out. I took the drugs, and eventually I started to feel better. When I got some of my energy back, I felt tired of feeling ill and useless and hanging out all day with no real plans. I wanted a purpose. I wanted a challenge. And then I found one. A 30-day silent meditation retreat for the entire month of June. I didn't really think about it. I just emailed them the money and did the familiar routine of packing everything away in my backpack. I showed up at the retreat, probably not in the most positive headspace. After leaving the caring yet very claustrophobic community at the yoga forest, I was ready for some alone time. So I got to work sitting still. Sitting in meditation for up to 10 hours a day was a challenge. The boredom was a challenge. Not putting honey on my oatmeal every morning was a challenge. Eventually, I became so demoralized by the endless routine of doing the exact same thing every day that I began to put huge amounts of honey on my oatmeal in the morning. Then I got really sick and had to go on a coconut water fast. I knew that this is exactly what was going to happen. I guess I just needed my body to convince me not to eat sugar one more time. The retreat was hard. I was avoiding going deeper and sitting still. I was avoiding doing the work. Then on one day, on day 18, we played a game. Kanika, our facilitator, gave us blindfolds and encouraged us to walk around the space as quickly as possible without bumping into each other. I hated it. People kept bumping into me, and I couldn't use my sight, my hands, or my voice to defend myself. This triggered some type of ancient trauma, and in a rage, I ripped off my blindfold and stormed out of the meditation hall. I was beyond upset. I wanted to leave. Instead of leaving, I was given the opportunity to go into the dark room. What's a dark room? A dark room is where you spend an extended amount of time in a room that's fully void of any source of light. Sounds fun, right? They told me I could go in for 3 days, and I said yes. Upon entering the room, I felt a deep sense of calm. I remember I had this little candle with me, and when I was ready, I said a prayer, took a deep breath, and blew it out. Sitting still in the complete pitch black darkness, it was just me and the room. And time must move slower in the dark because the next 3 days took forever. I was the most bored I've ever been in my entire life. I remember counting the hours. I remember listening to the birds during the day and the crickets at night. I meditated. I felt compassion for myself. I sent love to my inner child. At some point, I was able to see the faintest outlines of palm fronds against a deep purple backdrop. I would hesitate to call this a hallucination because it was so subtle, but it definitely wasn't real either. On the third day, I left the dark room. I emerged back into the jungle, and I couldn't wait until sunrise proper, and so I emerged just before dawn. And I could see the faintest outlines of palm fronds growing ever so slightly more visible again as the sky began to collect color. I couldn't really see where I was going as I tried to make my way back to the retreat center. I remember sliding down a hill in the dark, feeling totally okay with being completely lost. I remember feeling more whole as a person. Eventually, I found my way back to the retreat center, feeling not less afraid of the dark, but more at peace with myself.